episode of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. Our mission and goal is simple. We want to bring in-depth analysis and coverage for Indiana University sports to as many fans as possible across a multitude of modern platforms. We're recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Tuesday evening, August 6, 2019, where I am your host, Noah Freeman. On the docket for tonight, we have made it to 100 episodes. First, our one and only Nathan Christian was at practice yesterday, so he will fill us in on a little of what he saw yesterday. But next, we have a special guest on how to start the show, as we will grade how the offseason has gone for this Hoosier football team. After that, we'll be celebrating our 100th episode by talking about how this podcast basically got started. We'll share just a little bit about ourselves for those of you that don't really know us well yet, and we'll just have some fun tonight. At the beginning of August, right before football season starts in just a couple of weeks. But here with me tonight, Nathan is here ready to go. Matt will join us on a little later, but our special guest is one of the dynamic duo that is CrimsonCast. Scott Caulfield, how are you doing this evening? And first off, just congratulations on the 10th year anniversary celebrations. And I hope this past Saturday's festivities went well.
We had a good time. Switchyard and then Knicks. And that's a great night in Bloomington, any way you shake it. No, I appreciate it and honored to be on with you guys on the 100th episode. In pure CrimsonCast fashion, we kind of didn't really do a 10-year anniversary. It was really 11 and a half years. It was like going into our 10th year of broadcast. We kind of made it, but what we wanted to. But honored to be on here with you guys, and let's talk about some IU football. It's almost that time.
It is. It's exciting because that means college football is here, NFL is here, which leads into basketball. So it's a good point in the year, at least for sports. But Nathan, how are you this evening? And tell us a little about your experience at practice yesterday and some of the kind of stuff you saw.
I'm doing great. I mean, congratulations, Noah. I haven't been on the ride with you and Matt for the whole 100 episode run, so I know this night is a little bit bigger for you than it is, for you and Matt. So congratulations. And, it's funny you talk about football. I totally didn't watch like 2/3 of the Hall of Fame game or anything. It's not like I wanted, my football fix at all whatsoever. I can admit that. But look, as far as IU football goes, I mean, look, August is here. The first game's coming up at the end of the month against Ball State in Indianapolis. And IU had their first practice of the week on Monday. I think their first practice overall was back on Friday, but I was able to attend the Monday edition, and I was just taken aback to see how many people were there to just watch it and cover it and be part of the entire IU football practice operation on Monday. It seemed like there were some 20, 25 media members, it's just managers and assistants running all over the place with water and with notes and with things like that. So it was a pretty cool experience. I'd never been to a football practice, an IU football practice at least, before. So to be able to cover it for Indiana HQ and take some pictures and, see how things were developing during the 2-hour session was pretty interesting. I think the main question on everybody's minds is the quarterback battle. Obviously, there have been no official announcements or statements made, but just based on what I saw Monday, Peyton Ramsey was first up for every single drill, whether it was standard sort of one-on-one coaching things, individual drills, 2-minute drill, whatever. I mean, Peyton Ramsey was pretty much first man up. Now, Mike Penix and Jack Tuttle worked with other number one players. It's not like they didn't work with Nick Westbrook or Donovan Hale or Stevie Scott at all. The quarterbacks all got to work with the ones, but it just felt like as far as the specific drills and practice things went, Ramsey was first man up. Maybe it's just because it was Monday. I mean, I don't know. Maybe tomorrow's practice, they switch it up and go with Penix first up, or Friday, it's Jack Tuttle's day. I'm not sure how the plan works there, but, it seems like Ramsey's the leader in the clubhouse, and Tom Allen has said as much on Big Ten Network and during Big Ten Media Day when we were there. He had said Peyton Ramsey was the returning starter, and it was up to Penix and Tuttle to beat him out. As far as other players and position groups go, I mean, the running backs are the real deal. I mean, when you look at Stevie Scott, he looks bigger and better than ever. Samson James, the freshman, the 4-star highly touted player who committed to Ohio State, then decommitted to come here. He's fast, he's quick, he's got nice movements and nice cutting ability. Cole Guest is going to be a valuable addition to that running back group as well. O-line, D-line were impressive. Marcelino Ball stood out to me. The linebacker, the Husky position, he's switching from number 42 to number 9 this year. And Marcelino looked like a guy who was not only ready to have a big season this year, but he looked like he had NFL on his mind, because that guy looked absolutely huge and just ready to go. And he had a lot of signal calling responsibility during practice when I was there. So all in all, it was a cool experience. And funny story, the last thing we saw in practice was a 2-minute drill on Monday. And I don't know if you guys remember that Griffin Oaks field goal against Duke in the Pinstripe Bowl that went over the upright.
I was there.
That kick was good.
So
yes.
The 2-minute drill to end practice, it was a situation where the defense led by 2 and the offense had to march down the field and get at least a field goal. The offense did their part, drove the ball down to about the 25-yard line. Logan Justice came on to kick the field goal with like 5 seconds left, and it was a carbon copy replica, just right over the upright. And Tom Allen, after a second pause, said it was no good. So the defense won the drill. So I thought that was pretty funny how the whole thing wrapped up back on Monday.
Might be maybe his defensive side coming out a little bit in that, just having the defense win the win the. Oh, okay. Let's get in. Scott, do you have any extra things before moving on to the grading the offseason?
Nope, go for it.
Awesome. All right, for the next portion of the podcast, we're going to talk about a few off-season grades for the football program. We're going to discuss some categories such as recruiting and personnel changes, along with just a few other miscellaneous topics. But first up, recruiting. So this past summer, so most of this is going to be from anywhere maybe up to January, but mostly over the summer into late spring. Over the summer, at least since April up until now, where the most recent commit was this past Thursday, August 1st. Tom Allen and his staff has 15 commits so far for the class of 2020. It includes 1 4-star recruit currently in the rankings. They are 51st nationally at the moment, 10th in the Big Ten, above only Michigan State, Nebraska, Illinois, and Rutgers. I will kick it over to our guest first. Scott, how have you seen the recruiting, and what would you kind of grade the recruiting, at least so far in the offseason, for Tom Allen and his staff?
I mean, it's better. The thing is, the recruiting has been slowly getting better year over year, which is important. This is just the reality of the situation. We talked a lot about it this weekend at our event, is like the problem is, for the most part, Indiana, the recruiting is getting better, but within the Big Ten, we're kind of stagnant in the same spot. Our recruiting is pretty much the same as the other schools in the Big Ten are getting good with us. And unfortunately, look at Purdue. They've, in the last 2 or 3 years, completely vaulted over us. So, it's the reality. It's like we can sit here and complain about the Big Ten East, and it's tough, like Michigan State and Penn State and Michigan and Ohio State. But it's like, we're not changing divisions. We're not going to play in the SEC, in the ACC or something. So, or maybe Conference USA. But, overall, I think it's been better. I mean, it's similar to feelings I have on basketball. Like, I like a lot of what I see from Tom Allen on the recruiting side, on the program building side, on all that. We're getting close to that point where, like, we've had 2 or 3 years of recruiting getting better, where it has to start turning into wins. I mean, you look at this year, and like, we're playing, obviously, big wins against Rutgers and Maryland are games we have to win. Those are the 2 teams on recruiting that we've been ahead the last 2 or 3 years. And it's like, so we've got to turn those recruiting wins into actual football wins. That's how I look at it. Like, it's getting better. I think the other thing that I also like is this seems like one of the first years where we're having some guys come in that are, high 3 stars that we may even be looking to redshirt or are going to have to come in and just immediately start. And I think that's, when you get to a spot like Michigan, you're seeing it now with Michigan and Michigan State, where they're getting 5 stars on their line. They can just redshirt. That's when you have a program like totally humming. We're not at that point yet, but I think as some of our better recruits are at a point where they don't need to come in and immediately start, I feel like that puts us in a better place as well.
Yeah, and especially to the redshirting thing that you mentioned, it definitely helps with that 4-game redshirt rule. I think that's something that really helps, because you can put those guys in there for a couple games. If they're stellar to where you can't take them off the field, great, they get to start as a freshman. But if they're just average and they're not necessarily doing anything special, great, you get to redshirt them, like you said, with some of those higher 3-star caliber recruits. And going into next year too, I think at least the standout recruit is, of course, Rashawn Williams. He's the 4-star with most of the ranking places you see. He's probably the best, if next to Samson James, the best recruit that Indiana has possibly ever gotten, at least on paper, since they've been doing all of the rankings. And they've gotten a couple great 3-star recruits after that. But if I were to put a letter grade to it, I'd honestly give it a B-, C+, just because, like you said, they're getting better, but they're just the rest of them getting necessarily like you said Purdue was. Purdue's 5th in the Big Ten for recruiting it for the class of 2020 right now. They have 3 4-star recruits, which is something that Indiana needs to get to. Tom Allen got there with this past recruiting class. He got a couple 4-star recruits, but it's just got to keep getting there. And I think the only reason that I gave it even a somewhat decent grade is just because Rashawn Williams was able to commit, because otherwise there's not any standout players. It's more of your typical Indiana guys, and that's no offense to everyone else. I think a lot of them are going to grow into great players, but if you're talking about projecting and getting the team to continue to improve and get past this 5-7, 6-6, 4-8, whatever losing, tying record, you got to start getting even better recruits. So, Nathan, what were your thoughts on how recruiting has gone so far this past season?
Yeah, I'm actually going to be a little bit more optimistic here, a little bit more forgiving as a grader. And I know, Noah, you're the teacher, but, I'm going to be a little bit more forgiving. I'm going to give Tom Allen right now an A- as far as recruiting goes. And I know you talked about the ranking and all that, but I still heard that IU was better than schools like Michigan State and Nebraska as far as what you were saying. And Rashawn Williams is a big ticket player. I mean, this guy's a 4-star receiver. Like you said, he's almost a historic level recruit for this program. And now you've got to think Williams will start trying to recruit other guys to come to play for IU in the months to come. So I think this will be a class that really sort of develops and fosters itself so that we'll see a really impressive full list once signing day comes along. And remember, last year, or at least this incoming class of 2019 freshmen was a top 40 class in the country, which is a remarkable accomplishment for IU football. So I think all in all, I'm going to be a little bit more positive. I'm going to say it's like an A- or so.
Gotcha. All right, let's move on to some personnel changes. So we had a couple coaching positions change over this past season. Just as a reminder, remember Kane Womack, the linebackers coach, was added on as the defensive coordinator. Tom Allen stepped down more or less as the defensive coordinator and is going to focus just on head coaching and gave those duties to Kane Womack. And then Kalen DeBoer, of course, is the associate head coach, the QB's coach, and then obviously the offensive coordinator that everyone has been talking about, as they should over this past season. I'll kick it off first. I think it's good to see that Tom Allen can delegate, talking about Kane Womack and the linebackers coach with defensive coordinator, that he can delegate and take some pressure off of himself so that he can basically put all of his time into head coaching, because there is a difference. Most head coaches in college football, well, obviously no one does in the NFL, but most head coaches in college football don't have time at least to take 2 positions and put 100% of their attention to both of them. So when the IU defense is hovering, I think it's also because of pretty solid linebacker play. So from what I can tell, and from the reports, at least in the first couple of days of practice, Kane Womack was a fine choice for the position upgrade. I know Nathan can probably talk about his personality and what he's seen in practice yesterday, but I saw a lot of good things, at least so far, from Twitter, as much as you can get from that without being on the field and seeing X's and O's, and then, of course, playing games. I think most of my grade, which I'm going to give him, Tom Allen and the program, an A. I think most of my grade really comes from Kalen DeBoer. I think he's as good of a hire as Indiana could have gotten this season, especially his successes so far are something to get excited about for the program. He's the type of coach that he continues on his track record and progresses how he has been in his career so far. He won't be in Indiana for too long, because another program is going to have an offer for him that is a bigger and better offer. And that's kind of what Indiana at least is hopefully striving for, is to have coaches come in and succeed so much to where other programs are going to start offering them. Ohio State or those big time programs offer them for their offensive coordinator, or other smaller colleges for their head coaching position. We wanted them to be successful, because if they're successful, that means Indiana's being successful. So coaching changes because of better opportunities is a good thing. And if Kalen DeBoer continues that, obviously we'll have to see how his on-field play does this season. And we're going to see that pretty soon. But in terms of the offseason hype, I'm at least excited for the potential he could bring. Do you agree, disagree? What were your thoughts on how the personnel changes have gone, Scott, this past season?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree with the Kalen DeBoer hire. I mean, that's obviously the one that needed to be addressed, and I think is the right hire. I mean, I'm with you. I kind of love the straw man argument, and we get this all the time. Like when Kevin Wilson first came on, it's like, and he had a little bit of success. It's like, oh my God, we're going to lose him to somebody else. And then you start hearing it now, like, God, DeBoer's so good, like we're going to lose him. It's like, that's a great, I'd love to have that problem. I'd love to actually see it actually happen because, for us to have an offensive coordinator hired away means we've had some success. For us to have, I mean, I love Tom Allen, but I say it's like, I'd love to have him hired by like a top level school because it means that we had a really good run. We probably went to like a Big Ten title game or something that he got hired away. Like for us to have our coaches, like we're not, Indiana basketball is at a different spot. Indiana football is in a spot where we want our coaches to be hired away. Like I would love to have the problem that Purdue fans have with Braum, where they're, scared every single time an opening happens. So I think DeBoer's good. I mean, the only thing that I would say that gives you pause is you look at his offenses. They've been very good, but like at Fresno State and Eastern Michigan, it took him, his second year was obviously a lot better than his first year. And so there does seem to be a bit of a learning curve. And so that would be the only concern I would have going into this year is that maybe it's not just going to completely kill it off. But I mean, it's got to be better than last year than just, an offense where you're just running Stevie Scott up the middle, except for when you happen to play Michigan State and then you decide to throw it for no reason or having these, 6-yard passing plays of Peyton Ramsey. So, I mean, I think to me it's an A+ in the offseason because that was the side that had to be addressed. They addressed it. Now, my grade's subject to change if we don't win games.
Exactly. So, which has a role for everyone. And you accidentally said DeBoer. And I think we just have him so ingrained. I think we just have him so ingrained that we have to try and get Kalen DeBoer, not DeBoer.
Yeah, that won't be the first time. I'll probably say that. Like
I know. Could those names be any? Like seriously, can we just go with a stage name or something?
No. So for me, it's like I mean, as far as the grade goes, I'm going to give it a flat out incomplete. Like here's the deal. I totally agree with. Parting ways with Mike DeBoer at the end of last year. Although I guess formally he retired from the position. But here's the deal. I have no idea what Kalen DeBoer is going to do in the Big Ten. He might have been a great offensive coordinator in the MAC or in the Mountain West Conference, but this is a whole different ball game. It's something that I think Archie Miller is dealing with the basketball program. When we see IU go up against Michigan State and Michigan and, all the top teams in the Big Ten East, are the Hoosiers going to be able to put the ball in the end zone? So for me, if IU's offense struggles this year, there's potential downside of this only being a 4-win season, so with a solid offense, they can really reach unprecedented limits from what we've seen the last 10 or 20 years. So it's going to be incomplete. I agree with the changing the OC from last year, as well as agree with the delegation of play caller on the defensive side. But again, Kalen DeBoer as well as Kane Womack, what are they going to actually do now that the responsibility is on their shoulders?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Let's move on to, I kind of had... the category name is a little weird, but I guess the best name that I could talk about is the facilities, more or less. Of course, over at the more of the beginning of the offseason and the spring, early summer, we all heard about how alcohol sales are not going to happen at Memorial Stadium. Ticket sales with the new tiered pricing, everyone seems to be happy for. And then potentially there's been talk about legalized sports betting in Indiana happening somewhere maybe September if it stays on track and everything. But Nathan, how would you grade the facilities more? Everything has changed this past offseason?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, I just arrived in Bloomington this past weekend for the first time in a few years, and I walked across over the football stadium area, and I was so impressed to see how much that stadium's changed just in the last few years. I mean, they closed the south end zone, I believe it now is. I mean, it's a full bowl now at Memorial Stadium, so it looks really nice. The alcohol sales, I think, will really increase the in-game atmosphere, the game day atmosphere at home games, which I think is the biggest thing this program needs. A lot of people have said it's kind of a chicken or the egg deal where it's like if IU wins, maybe fans will show up. Well, if fans show up, maybe IU starts winning games a lot more often. So it's always been kind of a tug of war, that question. But I think having in-game, in-stadium alcohol sales will help in that department. And then as far as the other items go, IU's not ever going to be like Ohio State or Penn State in those areas, but it feels like they're making improvements. They're making investments, whether it's facilities or the offensive coordinator. If you put money into the program, I think you'll start seeing more bowl games and more successful seasons in the years to come.
How have you viewed the alcohol sales edition, Scott? Ticket sales, potentially legalized sports betting. What have you seen that to where it could potentially hurt or help the program?
Yeah, I mean, I think the alcohol sales can only help. I mean, it's I've joked about this before. If you really want to get people in the stadium, let's legalize marijuana use in the stadium, and just make it a safe haven, just Memorial Stadium. Like that would get all the students in.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I think from the sounds of what they're looking to do, where they're going to have alcohol sales throughout Memorial Stadium, I think that's better. I've been to a couple games at Purdue, at Ross-Ade, where they have like the beer garden, and it's kind of a cluster F because you get stuck in the spot. You're waiting in line for first off, they have the stupid drum and the train and all the noise, but they have, and they're also beating us in bucket games, which sucks too.
Yeah.
But you're standing in line for 38 minutes for one beer, which you're paying $12 for. So it's not really that awesome to do. So by having it in other areas around the stadium, I think that's going to be good. And it's kind of cool to be on the front end of things in Indiana, as opposed to hey, we're the last state where you can't buy alcohol on Sunday for the last 500 years. So
yeah.
It's kind of nice that we're on the front end of things. I've joked it wouldn't be good for IU, but we should have beer rankings, and then where you finish in the Big Ten is what kind of beer you should be able to sell. So Indiana can only sell Natty Light, and then we move our way up. You want to get to Yinling, you gotta beat Purdue to get to Yinling, and so you rank the 12 beers and you pick what you want. But no, I think it's good. I mean, the rest of the stadium stuff that was finished, I will take it back. I'm a little bit older than you guys. I mean, I remember when there was only two sides of the stadium, and it is the chicken or the egg thing has been going on for years. I changed my tune a long time ago that, for years people were like, why spend money on football? They suck. Let them win before you put money in it. It's it just doesn't work that way. And so I'm happy to see that over the last 15 years, the athletic department has really invested in the football program, because that's how you just can't sit there and wait for the team to suddenly start winning. It just isn't going to happen. And so they've invested. I mean, the stadium looks fantastic. The other side of the end zone is finished. I'm part of they used to be a donor area that was in the bowels of the stadium. Literally it was a mess to get to. It was down these stairs. There was exposed wiring. And I'm this is where the big donors are going. This is nuts. They now have a very nice area outside the the south end zone. I always get my directions mixed up. Bloomington, the south end zone, it's all glassed out. You're looking at the stadium. It looks awesome. Literally, I've been saying this for a while. Fred Glass has done about as much as he can do with the in-game experience, with the stadium, everything he can do besides getting some wins to get people in there, getting, 35, 40,000 people a game per game. That's about as good as you're going to get for a team that's going 4 or 5 wins a year.
Gotcha. So as someone that gets to go to a lot of games yourself, how do you think the new tiered ticket pricing system is going to be able to help fans and families get into games?
And I just, my ticket prices kind of stay the same. I think it's good. I mean, they haven't done a reorganization of the seating in the 12 years I've had season tickets. I had tickets before, but in the last, 8 to 10 years that I've had it with my family, they haven't reorged the seating at all, which is interesting because in basketball, every year you get to pick your seats. I mean, they reshuffle the entire deck in basketball depending on your priority points. And I've talked to the varsity club a lot about this. I'm why don't you do that in football? And they're well, people are set in their ways. And it's code for we don't really care. Because if you cared and you wanted to make, because I joke, if I win the lottery and I have $10 million and I want to sit in the 50-yard line, I can't do that because those seats are just that. Those seats are taken. And I'm not saying there's big donors looking to come into IU football like that, but it's that's So I think that tiered pricing is a good first step. I mean, I think they should shake the snow globe and just do an entire reseat of the whole area. But even for me, I mean, we have pretty good seats. We're in like section 8, row like 40. Please come by, say hi. And my kids, you're more than welcome to watch my kids for a while so I can watch the game. But, for us, 4 tickets for the entire season plus parking all in for the season is like $850. I mean, it's I've always said, like, it's unbelievably a great value, and that's there's tiers above us that are even higher. So I don't think it's a big deal. I think it's a step in the right direction to kind of give people who want better seating that ability. So I'm happy to see the university do it. I think they should take it even a step further.
Oh, yeah, I agree. And at least with some of those tiered ticket and the alcohol stuff, at least they're trying to change something, because a team like Indiana, where they go 500 or worse most of the time, change is usually at least a good thing to try and shake things up and see if just anything can be better for the customer who's trying to get into games and have the in-game experience. So hopefully those will yield results. But of course, the biggest one, as we've talked about a lot, is just winning games. Because if we're going to win 2 games this year, it doesn't matter how much you do. It doesn't matter if you legalize marijuana. It's not going to help anything. So
I beg to differ. I think we still have pretty big sellouts. Yeah.
So just start winning games. I think that's the biggest thing. So as we get into some of that, the last category I wanted to talk about was some more miscellaneous things. A few people this past season were placed on watch lists. Logan Justice was listed on the 2019 Lou Graza Award watch list. Hunter Littlejohn, Remington Trophy watch list. Coy Cronk, Outland Trophy watch list. Stevie Scott, Maxwell Award watch list. So in addition to that, I also saw that there was a pretty good offseason for some of the football alums. A lot of them got onto the 90-man rosters for camps, at least as of now, since we're in the middle of training camp and before the rosters are about to be cut down from 90 all the way to 52. But there were a lot of athletes from the alums getting into the NFL that were not drafted and were not supposed to make very many teams. So I think at least that was a positive to see a lot of former Hoosiers that were not supposed to do a lot of damage in the NFL starting to at least do stuff. I'm a Pittsburgh fan. If you watch on YouTube Live, you can see some of the stuff behind me. And T. Gray Scales, at least at the beginning after his first week, is doing better than any Pittsburgh fan would have hoped for. And of course, Pittsburgh is a team that always tries to compete in the playoffs. So it's not like he's competing for a team that's going 0-16, where there's not very many players on there. He's doing a great job. So it's nice to see people like that start to get recognized. I think in terms of the athletes on the watch list, I think it's great to see some of these players start to get recognized, at least, or recognized sort of kind of. They're just someone to look out for, but get recognized in the national media in some way. But I think for this kind of grade to be a great grade, I think you need to have someone be on maybe not necessarily a Heisman watch, but you need the national, like, let's just go ESPN for whatever. If the ESPN Sports Center guys are talking about someone, you want a player on Indiana to be on that kind of radar for it to start getting up there. And these are small little steps that I think are great. And who knows, maybe in a couple of years, someone like Stevie Scott could be close to that kind of thing, but more or less pretty good for some of those, at least, watch list players and post-football alumni. What have your thoughts been, at least in some of those miscellaneous things, Scott?
No, man, I think it's good. I will say I think this is where the university probably could step it up a little bit. Like the Tevin Coleman years, he was tearing it up and had great numbers, but yet it's like when I talk to friends in other Big Ten schools, they're like, oh yeah, like wow, that guy's pretty good. And we played him. It's like, yeah, the guy's like second in the Big Ten. I think the kid from Wisconsin had like a stupid number of yards, but it's like he was on like really no watch list. Like Jordan Howard, same thing. And even last year, I mean, I know it was a little bit fluky with some crazy games, but there was a point like 5 or 6 games in where Stevie Scott was like the 6th leading rusher in the country. Yep. And it's like, no word of it. Like nobody talked about it, like never on any of the shows. And like, I do think that does go to like IU's I mean, part of it's just like IU. It's like, all right, well, it's just like, we're not going to pay attention to it, but it's like, that is partially IU's marketing job. Is to like, they got to push that out there when the iron's hot, you've got to hit it. But I definitely remember like the Tevin Coleman, the Jordan Howard years, it felt like we were in this weird little bubble where like, these guys are some of the best running backs in the country and nobody else seemed to know about it.
That's a great point, because I think, was it Jordan Howard that finished, I think it was second nationally for rushing yards, but it was behind Melvin Gordon. Am I getting that? Or I think it was something like that. So yeah, that's a great point, because most people didn't know who Jordan Howard was, and people didn't know who Jordan Howard was going into the NFL when he was getting drafted. And some people start to know him just because he's been able to make a little bit of a name for himself. But even your casual NFL fan doesn't know who he is. But what have your thoughts been, Nathan, on those topics?
As far as the watch lists go, I think I saw somewhere where people are just kind of making jokes on how many players make these watch lists. Right now in the preseason, it's like if you have any sort of competence in your position, you make the Lou Groza watch list, or the Doak Walker or whatever. But I agreed with you in one respect, Noah. Like, it's important for IU to continue to have players make all conference teams and get into that Heisman discussion if possible. I mean, it felt like last year Rondale Moore had a few great games, and everyone was talking about him as a big time Big Ten threat, and maybe not Heisman contender, but definitely one of the most electrifying freshmen in the nation. So, if IU stumbles upon a player like that this year, who knows? Maybe Samson James has that kind of season. It is important that IU sort of feeds that frenzy as far as getting publicity to that player. With the NFL guys, it's going to be interesting to see, with preseason games sort of getting into full swing starting on Thursday, how many IU players really make an impact. It could be T. Gray Scales, it could be Chris Covington, who's in camp with Dallas, or maybe Jonathan Crawford, who's there with Tennessee, and we'll see Wes Martin and Brandon Knight on the offensive line. It's going to be fun. I mean, look, with more and more teams seemingly pulling their starters from preseason games earlier and earlier, it just opens the window of opportunity more for the IU guys.
Yep, exactly. Before we get on to a couple questions that were submitted on Twitter, Scott, I wanted to ask your outlook on this season. First, if you don't listen to CrimsonCast, they provide a great perspective on IU football, and they're one of the only podcasts that really discusses IU football, which is why we like to have Scott and Galen on. But for those that may not have listened to some of your recent episodes, what is your outlook on this coming season? Why, and how could you be swayed in one direction or another?
Yes, and thank you. By the way, it's great to have you guys talking IU. Like, the more IU football podcasts, the better. The IU basketball landscape is definitely there's a lot more people in it, and there's the few and far between, those brave few who decide to talk about IU football. It's funny, because I often wonder, like, who the hell would podcast about like Rutgers basketball? And then I realize, like, we're the version of that. Like, people are like, wow, who would talk about IU football? This season, I unfortunately have kind of, I don't want to say a negative view. I'm very not positive going into this season. The thing that I've run into, and like, I hear people talk about this all the time, and I've gotten lulled into this so many times. You look at a schedule like this, and you're like, the first thing you say is like, all right, well, Ball State, Eastern Illinois, and Connecticut, those are all guaranteed wins. So now we just got to get 3 more to get to a bowl. And I've been doing this for like watching IU football for 40 years now, 30 of it like actively. And, rarely do you just get to automatically chalk up wins in IU football. And so I have a hard time. I think we're going to beat Ball State, Eastern Illinois, and Connecticut. But there's a part of me, it's like we never are able to do the things we're not supposed to do while also doing all the things we're supposed to do. And so that's where it's like this season, unfortunately, the Big Ten East just doesn't do any favors, with Michigan and Ohio State being always on the same schedule, where you have these every other seasons where you basically, like, I would think you lose 2 home games, because you're getting Ohio State and Michigan at home, but in my mind, you're losing 2 home games because you're losing the ability to play, Maryland at home or Nebraska at home, or some of these tougher games at home, where unfortunately Michigan State and Ohio State and Michigan are kind of just L's, because we don't beat them since 1986 or 87. So, I'm unfortunately, I'll give you guys the scoop. It's your 100th episode. I'm looking at this year, honestly, I'm leaning toward 4 wins. And I hate to say it, but I look at it and I think those 3 wins, the Ball State, Eastern Illinois, Connecticut games are wins. You look at the rest of the schedule, I think Rutgers is a win. After that, assume Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State are a bridge too far, which I think is fair. I think we can compete with them. I'm not sure we can beat them. So you're basically looking at Maryland and Northwestern as and Purdue as your 3 possible wins. I kind of take Nebraska out. I think they're getting better. I think they're beatable, but I've been asking this question to everybody. Name me the last time Indiana went into a stadium that holds over 100,000 people and won a game, because we just don't do it. Like, whether they're good or bad, like, that's just a big stadium. We don't play well in those scenarios. We don't play well on the road, so I have a hard time thinking that we're going to beat Maryland. Northwestern's a good team, and unfortunately with Purdue, Brom's a really good coach. I mean, this is what I'm getting this is what worries me about like playing a team like Purdue, is because 3 years ago, I think it's fair to say that Purdue had less talent than Indiana football, or at least you could say they had the same talent. And every year since Brom has been coach at Purdue, we have looked out-coached in those games, and they've gotten progressively better, and that is what really concerns me about where we're at. And so you ask about like the coaching staff and those things. Like, in the end, we just got to look better, look like we execute, look like we practiced, and look like we're a professional team at the end of the year, which we haven't been able to do. And honestly, Purdue just looks like a much more well-run program than us at the end of the year. So I don't know, man. I think there's a very good possibility we could stumble in one of those 3 games, and then we could also pick up a win against the Northwestern or Purdue. I'm just not sure we can do both at the same time. And so I'm unfortunately thinking 4 wins. 5 wouldn't surprise me. I think 6 is a little bit too far. I was with Connor from the guys at Home Field this weekend. They have the whole like 9-win Indiana thing going on with their t-shirts. Like, God love them. That is bonkers crazy. Like, I would love it. I would love nothing more than 9 wins, the 9th being a bowl game. I think that's bonkers nuts, but that's kind of my overall outlook for the year. It's probably more than you wanted to hear, but that's kind of how I look at the year. I'd love to be proven wrong. To me, the last thing I'll say is, I think to me, Penix is the real key to this. I think if Penix is the starter early, I think we could get to 5 wins. I know we only saw a little bit of him last year, but the kid looks special. Like, the ball he throws look different. He's got a lot of pop on the ball. They run a different offense with him. This is a whole different subject. Like, I'm still not sure Peyton Ramsey's a bad quarterback, because when he throws it deep, it's actually a very good ball. He either gets it in the receiver's hands or gets pass interference. I just don't know why they don't throw it deep with him more. They treat him like he's Xander Diamont, and he doesn't always act like it. But I think what's going to happen is, as Nethan said, is that, Penix is going to be Ramsey's going to be the starter, because he's the starter. He's the leader of men that, Tom Allen says he is. So he's going to win the first 2 games. You chalk up the Ohio State loss. He'll be 3-1 going into Michigan State. And then it's like, well, you can't take a guy who's 3-1 and just bench him. So now he's going to be 3-2. If they lose to Michigan State, he'll beat Rutgers. And like, now we're at the meat of the schedule, and I'm not sure Penix is going to be starting or even playing that much, because it's like Ramsey's going to basically be de facto 3 or 4-2. And then it's like, I think you need Penix to win the other games to get you over the hump. So that's where I'm at. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, that's okay. I definitely agree. Especially, that was the one thing that concerned me, was how Peyton Ramsey is going to start, and assuming that Indiana wins the games that they quote unquote should win. Like you said, they're going to be 3-0, 3-1, 5, maybe 4-2. Into record, a positive record. How do you not continue with that kind of player? So, and then maybe Ramsey starts to struggle, but then you throw in Penix at Ohio State or Michigan or some high-powered program, let alone Michigan, where it's a great defensive program, and it's like, how is he going to do? You shouldn't expect him to do anything, basically. So, I definitely think
that game at Maryland is key. I mean, that's one of your wins you've got to try and get if you're going to get to 5 or 6 wins. And you're right. I mean, like, we have to be 4-2 going into that game. Like, if we're not 4-2, the bridge is like way too hard to get to 6 wins. So, Ramsey's going to start, and Ramsey will probably be 4-2. And there's no point, and you can't bench him at that point. And so now, but I'm not sure Ramsey's the quarterback who can get you a win at Maryland.
Yeah, exactly. And we've talked about this a little bit, how Ramsey's a great, and I don't know if you agree or disagree. Ramsey's a great, I think, in a perfect world, a great backup quarterback in the Big Ten. He comes in, could be able to do some stuff, but you don't want him to necessarily try and bring you to bowl eligibility to get 7, 8, 9 wins.
I do. Nathan, sorry, you're going to say something.
Well, it's funny. It feels like IU fans or IU people who have watched IU football are a lot more pessimistic about this team going into the season. When I look around at sort of what the Vegas odds makers have for IU this season, the over-under seems to be at about 6 or 6.5. So I don't know. Maybe they know something we don't, it's going to be fun to watch. I think they're going to be in every game. It's just a matter of how many will they actually end up winning. And maybe that's why Vegas has that number at 6 or whatever. And some fans think, hey, it's probably going to be just 4.
Yeah, no, I bet the under. But to Noah's point, Ramsey he doesn't look like a quarterback who's going to win you a Big Ten title or get you into a bowl off the Big Ten East. And again, it's like we saw so little of Penix last year, but the little bit we saw, even sitting in the stadium, everybody around me is like, oh my, like there's a lot of people who just first game, like, oh my God, this guy's good. Like, look at the ball he's throwing. Like, he looks different. He looks special. And it's just, I never coached football. I never played a ton of football. Like, I can't say that, but you can just tell when you watch a guy, it's like, wow, that guy is special. And again, the offense they ran for him, even in the 22 plays, was wildly different than the offense they ran for Ramsey the entire year. This is where it's tough for me to really put any kind of blame at Ramsey's feet, just because the offense they run for him is so pedestrian. They seem to be anything over 9 yards. It's yeah, we can't let him throw that. And again, I'm not sure why, because his deep throw looks pretty good and his stats are pretty good on it. And we Ohio State, he was doing pretty good when he was bombing it, but it's they're no, he can't throw it over 7 yards. And so I think it's partially because of play calling. Maybe they're just nervous about things, but they definitely are a very conservative team with Ramsey under center. And it's not good when, he's not, unlike, he's a very good athlete. He's not an elite level Michael Vick athlete. He shouldn't be our second leading rusher. And that is, I think, one of the problems of the offense as a whole is when he's your second leading rusher, basically because the play calls are all right, drop back. And if the guy on the 2 yard, cut route isn't open, just run for 3 yards.
Yeah. Let's move on to some of the questions real quick so we can get into our next segment. If you would like to send in a question for each week, DM us on Twitter, DM us on Twitter, comment in the post that we put out, Facebook, message us, all of it. We will answer your questions live on air for the podcast. But our first question, Respectable Adam on Twitter, longtime listener, big IU football fan. He asks, and we'll shoot these over to you, Scott, as our guest. You can elaborate as much or as little as you'd like, but what have your thoughts been on the linebackers? How will the return of Juwan Harris help the defensive line?
Yeah, I'm going to say this to you guys. I don't get that deep into the line and the O-line. I think, what you do see that I think is good with our defense is that you did lose the 2 top tacklers of last year, but the top 5 guys on tackles for losses last year were all, sophomores and freshmen. So I think you have a really good core coming back, but I will, Nathan, you were at practice. So I will see this one to you. You know a lot more about this than I do.
Yeah, no, the linebackers I think that IU fans should get to know right away are Raekwon Jones, Marcelino Ball, and Micah McFadden. I think those are the 3 guys that are going to be on the field for the majority of the plays. They're going to be extremely important and vital as far as tackling goes, as far as signal calling and responsibility. I was impressed. I included Micah McFadden in that group with those other 2 guys. This is a kid who looks to be kind of ready to rock and roll in that middle of the defense as a linebacker. Maybe he's and if he's your 3rd or 4th guy, that's pretty encouraging. But I commented to both of you earlier. Marcelino Ball looks like somebody who has dreams of playing in the NFL, just the way he's improved his body since his freshman year. So all in all, the linebacker crew is pretty deep. But I'm looking forward to seeing Raekwon Jones, Marcelino Ball, and Micah McFadden specifically as helping that group become as great as they can be.
Yeah, my only comment on the linebackers, I agree with everything you said, Nathan. My only thought is that we don't necessarily have, at least as of now, hopefully someone proves us wrong, but we don't have a T. Gray Scales, one of those players that just lights up the field. There's not this big athlete that's going to come in and change games for you. They've got a lot of consistency on it, but hopefully someone's able to step into that role.
Yeah, don't be surprised if Marcelino Ball becomes that guy by the end of the year.
Yeah, and hopefully he gets some of those opportunities since he's quote unquote a Husky, so he gets to go do some secondary work a lot of times. But let's move on to Tyler on Twitter. Had a bunch of questions about the offensive line. So how about I read these 3 questions, Nathan and I will answer, and then I will ask you, Scott, what your overall thoughts on the offensive line are. The first question was, how much does it help to have 3 seniors with experience return to the offensive line? Those 3 seniors he was referencing was Coy Cronk, Hunter Littlejohn, and Simon Stepaniak. We've talked a lot about on this episode. I'll take this one first, Nathan. We've talked a lot about on at least this podcast how the offensive line is decent, at least in our opinion, not necessarily elite like it has been at least close to in some recent seasons. But I think the comment about the 3 seniors with experience, I think that plays a huge role because more than half of the offensive line are not just upperclassmen, but seniors. So they've, at least since there was a lot of turnover going into last year into this year, these 3 guys have at least been able to play with each other more instead of having your transfer come in and trying to replace a bunch of these big, like Dan Feeney and all of these big, great players. But experience is great. They've at least had 1 year with all of them together. This kind of leads into the next question because he's covering most of the entire offensive line. Can the progression from Caleb Jones and Harry Kreider be enough to solidify this as a mid to high tier offensive line in the Big Ten, which are the other 2 starters? So Nathan, can the progression from those 2 be enough to solidify them as a mid to high tier offensive line in the Big Ten?
Absolutely. I think that's something that this group can be. I don't know about high tier necessarily, but definitely sort of in the top half of the Big Ten. Continuity is key on the O-line. So when you've got 3 seniors, that can only be a good thing. Coy Cronk is advertised as one of the best offensive tackles in the Big Ten, and he's assumed that responsibility. He talked at Big Ten Media Day about how he's still angry that IU lost to Purdue. Of course, Cronk is a Lafayette guy. He's excited to start the season in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium. So I'm looking forward to seeing the O-line pleasantly surprise people as far as being one of the better groups in the conference. Tom Allen has said, though, he's a little bit concerned about the depth. So if there are some injuries, especially to those seniors, then IU's offense could be in some hot water.
Yeah. And then with the last question, how does Penix at QB affect how important Caleb Jones is in the offensive line? Little context, Michael Penix, remember he's a lefty quarterback. Caleb is the right tackle. So Caleb would be the blind side to Michael Penix when he's in the pocket. And when you talk about typically the left tackle, but our lefty quarterback being the right tackle, whenever you talk about the blind side position, of course, that position is huge for whoever is in at quarterback because of the obvious getting sacked and getting hurt from the blind side. But I think it's huge. Caleb Jones is a younger guy, sophomore, who's looking to try and become basically the leader of the offensive line as some of these players will graduate and move on. So he's been progressing, as our last question had, progressing tremendously, and hopefully he can step up. And if Penix were the guy to come in at QB, hopefully Caleb was able to step up. But in terms of how important is he at that spot, I think it's really important, especially this year. It's going to be really key for him with Ramsey coming in. And if they go between Ramsey/Jack and then Penix, his position changes a lot. He's going to have to go from not being the blind side tackle to being the blind side tackle. So he's going to be a guy that's got not just a lot of physical work to do, but a lot of mental work to try and basically change between 2 positions, even though he's playing the same position. But Scott, what are your thoughts on the offensive line just overall, and what are you looking from them from this season?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Nathan was saying, that with the offensive line, you have consistency, and that's going to be key. I mean, the thing with it's crazy. You know, we had Bill Connolly on our podcast a couple of weeks ago, and if you haven't read his stuff, he does Football Outsiders. He just got picked up by ESPN. He has great stuff. He has kind of 5 factors. The thing with both our offense kind of goes to what we were talking about, offense and defense, is like you look at our offensive line adjusted, numbers through Football Outsiders, and we're ranked in like the top 20, 30. I mean, this is what's really frustrating with Indiana football, is our offense and defense are both ranked in pretty good spots. There's only 2 areas where we are awful, and one is we're 107th in the country in finishing drives, and that's something that has to change. But really, like he talked about this on our last podcast with Galen, explosiveness. there's 130 or so teams in D1. Last year we were 123rd on his ranking in explosiveness, and that is to the point we were just talking about with defense. Like that is something that we haven't had in years. Is like hopefully Marcelino Ball can be that guy, as somebody who can just get us a pick six and just turn the field. We see that all the time where we're busting our butt. I cussed a lot. Sorry, I almost said a bad word. We're busting our tail to get the ball through, like against Michigan State. Like, and there's always games. It's like, like they go up 13-6 or something. And like, we drive and we have this killer, 18 play drive with like 4 Stevie Scott runs and get through 3 third downs, another third down. We finally score a touchdown. And it's like, then they come back and like, boom, it's like 2 plays touchdown. And you're like, damn it. Like we just got it within 1 point and now we're down 8 again. And then they come back and like, we throw a pick. It's like, we never get that like quick hit. And it shows in the stats. And like that is, so from a broader view, like hopefully our offensive line can give, that was honestly Peyton Ramsey's problem too, is I'm not picking on him. He had like, a tenth of a second to make a decision. And then he had to start running because the O-line couldn't hold anybody last year. And with a Penix with a bad ACL or a repaired ACL, that is something that we need time for him too. But those are the things that I look at. Like that is something that just as a program has to change. I don't know how you teach explosiveness or get it. It's probably just getting more athletes, but it is, to be 123rd in the nation, that is like just ridiculously bad. And that is something that has to change because it really is. It's what changes a lot of these games from wins to losses. When you're playing the Marylands, the Northwesterns, even the Purdues, it's like, if you could just, have one drive, just 2 plays touchdown. And then, your offense isn't just dragging these things out, or your defense could just get a pick six and get the ball back. It's like, we just never get those game-changing plays, and they always seem to happen against us, especially when it's like we just drug ourselves back into the game to tie it up. It's like, I'm always like, damn it, they're going to have like a kick return for a touchdown.
And a little bit of context for the 123rd, that is the bottom of the FBS, because it's not like basketball where there's 350 teams. They are literally at the very bottom of that. So that is 123rd is extremely bad. But Nathan, go ahead, say what you're going to say.
No, just on that note, I understand why some teams would be that low, because maybe they just don't have the players, because a lot of their better players went to the NFL the previous year. IU's got the guys.
Yeah.
With Nick Westbrook and Donovan Hale and Walt Fillier and Ty Freifogel. Freifogel made Iowa and Michigan's defense look like, little peewee football players at times. These guys, and that's just the receivers. We've talked about IU's deep running backs, and now the tight ends will be used more in the new offense. So explosiveness, if it doesn't improve this year, something horrible happened. There's just no other way to explain it.
Which could potentially happen to Indiana football. But Scott, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's always great to have more IU football opinions on, and we'll definitely have to talk as the season goes on. But where can people follow your work and CrimsonCast if they, for some reason, aren't already?
Yes, the Hoosier.com, CrimsonCast, heard on the Hoosier podcast. Just search us on iTunes, and really appreciate you guys having us. And by the way, congrats on 100 episodes. That is no small feat. You guys should be very proud. Keep fighting the good fight, man. You have more podcasts, and we have IU football wins in the last couple of years, so we've got to change that around. But CrimsonCast. I'd love to come back on during the season. Hopefully, we're talking about a run to the Gator Bowl or something.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks again, and we shall talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. As we move on with our episode, right before we get into our 100th episode celebrations, Matt is here. He was Matt is on vacation. Where are you on vacation?
I'm in St. Augustine, Florida.
St. Augustine, Florida. Okay.
Oldest city of the United States.
So he was on vacation, so he was able to come on and talk to us because he was so upset when he heard that he was going on vacation during the 100th episode. And we're going to talk a little bit about our background, but Matt definitely wanted to join us, and it's great to have him here. Before we go on to that, Nathan, I wanted to quickly, because I think we definitely need to mention this. Do you want to quickly talk about who won the week this week?
Absolutely. And this is news that came down earlier today, but the IU men's soccer program got some great news this preseason. They were ranked number 2 in the United Soccer Coaches poll in the country, folks, not just in the Big Ten or whatever. After a second straight trip to the College Cup last season, IU is ranked number 2, just behind Maryland, the team they lost to in the College Cup last season. So It's pretty exciting to see. It's going to be another great season, it seems, at Bill Armstrong Stadium for the men's soccer program. Also getting some recognition was Jack Marr, who was named to the Mac Herman Trophy watch list. He's just a sophomore.
Yes.
He was the only sophomore to make the watch list. That guy can really play. So, Jack Marr, the Indiana Hoosier men's soccer program, on the way up, as usual, it seems, this time of year.
Yep, exactly. Now, I know this podcast is going to run a little late. We probably figured that for our 100th episode, so apologize if you're listening to the longer episode, but stick around. You definitely want to hear some of the stuff that we're about to talk about. But what we wanted to do for this next part, we wanted to kind of talk about how to kind of celebrate our 100th episode and the 100th straight episode without missing a week, I might add. We wanted you guys to just know a little bit about us, especially for those that have joined our audience recently. If you've been with us since the beginning, you might know a lot of this, but we just wanted to fill you in to get you to know us a little more if you decide to keep listening. So first up, basically how this podcast got started. I'll start and then I'll have Matt talk a little bit about it. I started to get into podcasts personally about early college once I got to IU, and my IU sports love came quickly. I found podcasts such as CrimsonCast, of course, and Assembly Call. Stronger than ever. Matt and I were hanging out one time and we kind of joked about just starting our own podcast together, and it kind of just became into why not sort of thing. And we found one other friend to join us in September of 2017. We met, we talked about it, and the Hoosier Sound was born. It actually started out, for those of you that didn't know, it actually started out as an IU sports podcast and other sports. We just liked multiple sports so much that we wanted just a platform to kind of talk about that NBA current news, NFL current news, just various current sporting events, the World Cup last summer for the men's that we talked about a lot. And we just wanted to talk a lot about that. But as it started to progress, we thought it'd be better for our audience to kind of move into one specific area. And of course, you got to talk about IU basketball, because I don't think you're doing the IU sports podcasting world justice if you talk about everything else other than that. So, of course, talk about a lot of men's basketball, a lot of football, but we also wanted to bring a little bit of the other stuff in with it. That includes football, since not everyone does football stuff. We wanted to talk and bring you a little bit, and it's obviously not all the time, but we want to bring you to talk a little bit about women's basketball. So when they won the NIT tournament, we could have an episode like that, have the Hoosier Sound Offs where you can get just a quick snippet of how some of the other programs are doing, just to be, of course, more centered to basketball and football, but be able to talk about some of those other things. And as we kept going, we kept growing slowly over time until Indiana HQ asked us to join them just under a year ago. Rob and a couple of, I know his buddies that are, of course, working here, we're talking about launching that kind of thing, and they were ready to go, and they just needed a podcast. So just under a year ago, Rob messaged me, asked if we wanted to be a part of the podcast, and we basically partnered with Indiana HQ, and here we are. So that's our background, how the podcast got started. Matt, would you like to give us your story about how you kind of got into Indiana sports? Because all three of us have a very different way of how we got involved with IU sports.
Sure. So growing up, my dad is a psychologist, so that's what he does for a living. Growing up, he always had this toy chain teddy bear that had an IU logo on it. I was very confused why he had it. He liked B.F. Skinner a lot, who is a phenomenal psychologist and psychological researcher, and he happened to be one of the founders of IU's psychology school. He was one of the presidents at one point, and then he went on to go to Harvard and write random theories and become really famous. But anyways, he's part of IU, so he had something about that. So after I saw the Hoosiers playing, there's some stupid reason, but I did. I rooted for them anyways. And then I remember some random night in November, I heard that IU was playing #1 Kentucky in Assembly Hall, and it was a school night, but I was like, Dad, we have to watch it because it's supposed to be a big game. And he was like, sure, let's watch it. And the rest is history. I became an IU basketball fan from then on, playing saxophone. I tried to get into Jacob School music. I didn't end up doing that, but like a bunch of random different things all led me to IU, and then I became a fan and went to school there. And now I'm talking about them on a podcast. So,
Yeah, I kind of got to Indiana sports just like Matt, just a kind of different roundabout way. I wasn't someone that grew up in Indiana. I grew up in Northern Virginia, just outside of DC. And before that, I apologize for any of the live audience, the connection problems. Matt is on a hot spot, so we're doing the best we can under the circumstances. But Matt grew up in Florida, so that's how he kind of got to Indiana, Virginia over to Indiana. I've been a music guy my whole life, just how Matt talked about being in the saxophone, being in the 100 and the basketball band and everything. I was a guy that wanted to do music, and I had a friend right before me actually get into the Jacobs School of Music. And so I looked at that, and it was one of the best schools, not the best school that I was applying to, auditioning to. I got in, and that's how I basically came over to Indiana, because there are not too many people that come all the way from Virginia over to IU. So that's how I got into it. And I'm the kind of guy that's a huge sports guy. I didn't have any family members or anything root for IU. So I came into IU basically as a freshman in college, but I get attached to teams pretty quickly. So I became such a big supporter and lover for IU sports right as my freshman season. And it was the freshman season was my 2014 football season, which was not good whatsoever. So if I can get hooked onto IU football, let alone basketball, in a pretty poor season, then you can see the kind of passion that I started to have. And that's basically how I got into the sports world for the Hoosiers. Nathan, I know you grew up a little closer than Matt and I did. So how did you get into IU sports?
So it's funny. So I grew up in Indiana, unlike both of you, but I was never a big IU sports fan. I was never really a big college sports fan. I grew up about half an hour outside of Chicago, so most of my time was with the Cubs and the Bears and the Bulls and the Blackhawks. And really in Chicago, unless you went to a real prominent college football school or college basketball school, they don't really talk about it too much. So then after I went to IU, football season started right away. So I went to a couple games and I really liked it. And IU didn't have a great season, but I'm a big sports fan, and I enjoyed going to Memorial Stadium and watching the team play with my friends. And then, that went right into basketball season. Now, my freshman year, IU's basketball team was not good. It was the second year of the Tom Crean era. So there were a couple of seasons there where the basketball team really struggled. It was a couple of those 9-10 win seasons. But what really sort of won me over was a game my sophomore year where they beat a ranked Illinois team at Assembly Hall. Really low scoring game. It was like 52-49 or something like that. Jordan Hulse hit a big three late in the game, and I think Gus Johnson broadcasted on Big Ten Network. The court was stormed by a few people. I was in the upper deck for that game, and then Tom Crean came out in the lobby of Assembly Hall and started hooting and hollering and saying how IU's going to be back, and you can get used to wins like this. And I was like, look, if IU's got a 33-35% win percentage, and Assembly Hall is packed every night, and every win is like a festival out here, there's got to be something fun about this. And then my junior and senior years was when IU really sort of ascended as a basketball program. I'll never forget the Kentucky game. I was there. It was awesome. I stormed the court for that one. And it's just been sort of a connection ever since. And why not? I mean, I went here, got my undergrad here, my master's here. So it's good stuff. And I mean, it's going to be fun to see this year what happens. Perhaps the first 7 or 8 win football season in a long time happens, and we have a whole lot to talk about this year. But until then, it's been fun. I can't believe I've been with you guys for what now? It's probably like 30, 20, 25 episodes or so. So,
yeah.
Here we go. Let's go on to 200.
Yep. Nathan joined us. It was the three of us. There was actually 2 Noahs and a Matt. It was the 3 of us for 4 or 5 months ish, something around there before the time commitment got really big. And it was just Matt and I for about 10 or so months, just under a year or so. It was just us trying to crank away, especially over the summer, long summer months, trying to get through some of those episodes where both of us are out of town, but we wanted to get content out every week and such. But Nathan came along, like you said, 20, 25 episodes ago, just a little bit after Indiana HQ and Hoosier Sound partnered up. We definitely wanted to. We had him on as a guest once, and Matt and I were just like, man, the kind of content that Nathan likes to give was just like, we just need to have him on every time. And Nathan was gracious enough to join us every week, and it's been a blast. I want to leave us on this one last story. I think it kind of sums up how maybe all of us kind of got into this. Is I was actually at, and this is the season that haunts Hoosier fans, or at the end of the season, I guess, that haunts Hoosier fans for forever. I was at the Syracuse IU game, the Sweet 16 game, and my dad was he grew up in upstate New York, and he had family members that went to Syracuse and everything. So basically, he didn't go to Syracuse, but he had a lot of family members there. He went to a smaller college, and I grew up watching Syracuse. Jim Boeheim fan, loved watching the Zone, and just grew up. And my first experience, I actually got tickets from my dad for like early Father's Day or something like that. And I'm like, hey, let's go to the Sweet 16 game. And of course, being IU number 1 seed and going in, it was crazy. It was all red and orange basically the entire way. Even though there were 2 games being played, there was not many Marquette fans and whoever the other team was there. And that was a crazy game. I was rooting against Indiana at the last point that they were up at the top of the nation. And it's crazy to see around how then just a few years later that all 3 of us are basically talking IU sports weekly, putting a commitment out every week for you guys. And I think that just kind of started some random spot. We're now talking about IU Sports Podcast, but thank you guys for joining us for our 100th episode. We appreciate your support, especially those who have been, even if you've been with us just today or all the way since episode 1. It really means a lot to us, honestly, because we couldn't do this. I mean, we could, but it wouldn't mean a lot if we did this for 0 people. Thank you, especially to the live audience coming out, participating in the chat section. We really appreciate your support. We will be back next Monday for another edition of the Hoosier Sound Off. Speaking of, if you're listening all the way to the end of this, we might have a great podcast episode to talk about next week because Anthony Leal is deciding between Stanford and Indiana this Friday. So we actually have some great episodes coming up the next couple of weeks before football starts. So this is going to be August is actually going to be a good month for content. But anyway, news and updates come through Twitter, and subscribe so you don't miss all of our weekly shows. But most importantly, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review on iTunes or Facebook. Tell a friend, share links. Your support is how we grow this podcast so we can reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.